Please welcome Melissa Sklarz, Community Relations Liaison, Equality, New York. Rabbi Steinmetz, Imam Mansour Rafiq Umar, Assembly Member Grace Lee, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and please welcome Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado. Please welcome the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good morning. I want to first just thank John Jay College and President Mason, to all of my colleagues in government, and to all of the community advocates and faith-based leaders who participated in our roundtable conversation earlier. It was a very productive and informative conversation. We know that we are living in a time of rising hate and violence. The climate we are in right now is very toxic. There's a nastiness and a vitriolic hostility permeating throughout our public discourse and public conduct. There's a growing pessimism and cynicism that is making us less compassionate and less understanding of one another. Instead, we are growing more rigid and hardened in our respective points of view. Essential democratic norms like mutual tolerance and self-restraint have withered away. As New Yorkers living in one of the most diverse places in the world, we have a responsibility to lead in this moment, and we will. This administration is committed to uplifting our diversity and protecting communities from all forms of hate. To that end, I was honored that Governor Hochul asked me to chair the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit a little over a year ago. Since its formation, the unit has rolled out 10 regional councils, launched a hotline, and continues to hold roundtable discussions with members from communities facing an increased risk of hate. In addition to making sure we protect communities from harm with and through the application of the law and providing security grants, we must also create spaces for difficult conversations and hard truths, where it is safe to be mistaken or to acknowledge fault, even ignorance, where mercy and grace are in abundance, and where love is at the center of the work being done. We just celebrated the life and legacy of the great Dr. King. And it was Dr. King who said, quote, "Love is the most durable power in the world, the most potent instrument available in humankind's quest for peace and security." I know the governor is dedicated to grounding our work in love and determined to lead us during these incredibly challenging times. And with that, please join me in welcoming the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good morning. Do I have a great Lieutenant Governor or what? Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, thank you for rising to the occasion when this state needed a symbol, someone to go out to every corner, all 10 regions, north, south, east, and west, and be that voice to bring love and compassion and shared experiences with others. And so I thank you for stepping up. You've put a lot of effort into it. We're just getting started, but I'm already feeling the results because people know we are listening, and that's the most important step. So let's give another round of applause to our Lieutenant Governor. I just spoke to an incredible group of people that the Lieutenant Governor had convened. People who represent communities that are under siege, that want nothing more than to live in peace, live their true identity, practice their faith, wear the clothes they choose to wear to represent their beliefs. And all of them shared their experiences of what it's like and what they're seeing in their communities and how hurtful it is to know that there are people out there who will do them harm or say something horrendous, hurtful, evil, just because they're different from them. So what I found in that room, this gathering, was this sense of commonality, that there is a bond that unites those who have been subjected to hate crimes and hate speech. But when you look around and think about it, there are far more people who are on the receiving end of this than the perpetrators. And in that, there's a strength, not to be victims, but to say that there are more of us than you, and if we band together, we can have an impact in casting aside the hate and the disrespect that leads people to these actions. So I left that conversation hearing from people's different points of view, their different communities they represent, but I left to even feel even more committed that righteousness is on our side, that we will speak the truth. We will use the four-letter word of love in more places than it has been in our state, and let young people know that what they may be hearing at homes does not have to be their perception of the world out there. There are other forces out there in our schools, in our religious institutions, in our community centers, and other adults who embrace them and say, no, 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 you don't have to believe that. You don't have to be that person. And that gives me hope. It truly, truly does. And so I want to thank again the people who convened our DHR, Human Rights Commissioner, Maria Imperial. I thank you for your leadership. Mark Levine, I want to thank him for his involvement as well. Appreciate him. You'll be hearing from our district attorney, Alvin Bragg, and I want to thank him for being one of the leaders in helping devise language, working with Senator Brad Hoylman and Assembly Member Grace Lee to help us have a package of action items that are so important. And it's not always easy to get things over the finish line in the legislature. That's all right. We have our conversations in a respectful way, in a loving way. Well, maybe that's going a little too far, but in a very respectful way. But at the end of it, the more voices they hear from this room, they'll understand the urgency of what we're talking about here today. Also, I want to thank the members of the state legislature who've joined us, District Attorney from Queens, Melinda Katz, Westchester District Attorney Mimi Roca, and I want to talk to her about something that she just experienced as the District Attorney, because just overnight, there were horrific images and hateful speech scrawled on the front of Jewish businesses between New Rochelle and Scarsdale. And the community's traumatized. You may think they're only words on a sign or across the storefront, but it tears at you as a human being when you know that attackful message, that hateful message is meant for you. So thank you for standing up and being courageous at a time when we just don't understand where these forces are coming from, why they're feeling more empowered than ever before, why they're so visible now. Thank you. Thank you for representing your community so well. Councilmember Gail Brewer, whose district we're in today. Councilmember Brewer, always great to see you as well. And Councilmember Zwang, I want to thank Susan for joining us as well. And our host here, John Jay College President Carol Mason. We've used this forum for many, many important conversations, and you've always been so hospitable, welcoming, especially to bring different voices together to look for common solutions. And the members of the community who we'll be hearing from as well. I want to thank all of them for joining us here today. It's hard to talk about this topic. It really is. And I was just talking to the imam about his experience growing up as a young person and how his parents were very intentional about exposing him to different cultures, taking him to churches and synagogues so he, as a young Muslim, could understand people's existence, their practices, their values, and how at the end of the day we're all still human beings. I had that same experience. My parents, Irish Catholic activists, they took us everywhere. They took us to those interfaith services. We're little kids and eating different food and seeing different people, but they exposed us. And that is why I have this sense of empathy and understanding that started as a child. I don't know that every family imparts that same experience to their children. I suspect not. But imagine a world where that happened, where those seeds of understanding and respect and the awe of the diversity, how amazing it is, were planted in children. This was part of our conversation just now. Where else could we having these conversations in schools and in other places we can influence young people. But what these young people today are exposed to the exact opposite. When you think about the algorithms on social media that are targeted toward these young people when their minds are still young and developing, their views aren't cemented yet, but this is where they're getting the influences. And it's poison. It's poison. I've talked about it with our Attorney General, Tish James, about what we can do to stop young people from being targeted from social media messages that are so hateful and so harmful. And then you think about the messages, the visual messages. We just talked about what happened in Westchester. Someone in Central Islip just had horrible graffiti calling on people to kill the migrants. Who does that? Kill the migrants? They came here? They traveled thousands of miles to live here and just get a job so their kids don't starve? And someone calls on them to be killed? Or I'm up at Cornell University a few months ago, and a fellow student called upon anyone who could to follow a Jewish student home and slit their throats. My friends, this is New York. This shouldn't happen here. It shouldn't happen here. And I'm sorry to say that after seeing hate crimes rise against our Asian community, especially during COVID, the LGBTQ, the trans community, crimes against the young people in particular are up. Racism has been there forever. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. But October 7th was a turning point in our state because we've seen a horrific rise in hate crimes directed at Jewish and Muslim neighbors. Threats are up 400% since October 7th. And that's the threats. There's a 95% increase in hate crimes against Jewish residents of New York. There's a surge of anti-Muslim hate crimes as well. Young Muslim girl harassed on the subway just because she was Muslim. This atmosphere of fear is becoming too pervasive. NYPD saw an increase in crimes just since last year. And I mentioned the LGBTQ plus community. Hate crimes are up 71% against this community just in 3 months. There's a lot going on across our nation. We have book banning and laws being introduced and passed against these communities. It's a regular part of the headlines. People talk about it. It's almost normalized. Well, that's that state. They're doing that. It's okay. It's not okay. This is still the United States of America. Just because I can say you'll never have a law that bans a book or makes someone feel uncomfortable under our laws doesn't mean we shouldn't care about what's happening in other states as well. You know, when I think about something that some governors share a bond, a club you don't want to be in, when you represent a state that was the place where there was a horrific murders of people targeted because of the color of their skin or their beliefs. It happened in Buffalo, New York. May 14th, 2022. When you get the message that there was someone so radicalized on social media, an 18-year-old who had nothing to do during 2 years of COVID in isolation, has a chance to read a manifesto about how people were killed in New Zealand and basically absorb that as his own. That was the playbook. Then he, on the internet, is able to find out the largest black population in driving distance to his rural community in southern part of New York. And it turned out it was 3 hours and 15 minutes to get to Buffalo. It would have been 3.5 hours to get to the Bronx. That's how random this attack was. Buffalo was targeted because it was a little bit closer drive. 10 people killed at a grocery store 15 minutes from my house, 12 minutes from my house. It happens in other states. I didn't think it would happen here, and it did. And immediately in the aftermath, we got together, the legislature, we stepped up, we changed laws, we said no more. We'll do everything in our power to protect our citizens. And first of all, no one who's 18 years old should be able to get their hands on a military-style assault weapon, number one. How about that law change? And beefing up our surveillance of social media hate crimes and threats so our state police can be aware of it. I'd much rather be in the business of preventing crimes and trying to solve them later. Our DAs know this as well. So it's strange to me that I have to stand here and condemn hatred. But we're at that point. We need leaders to step up. We need people who use the pulpit they've been granted by the people to speak out with a strong voice, and in the face of evil, declare that we will stand shoulder to shoulder with each other against those forces, but also to bring resources to the table, $35 million for crime, to give people to protect their institutions, securing communities against hate crimes, the physical security. I'll never forget when I went to Cornell and I sat with these Jewish students who had just been traumatized. I said, "What can I do for you?" And they said, "Well, we need security here." And I said, "What?" They said, "Can we just get cameras?" I said, "Cameras? You just want cameras?" I said, "I'll run down to the Home Depot and buy you a camera right now. I'll put it in myself." I mean, these kids just wanted to know that someone could watch and monitor the situation so they wouldn't be subject to it. Whether it's a temple, a mosque, a church, a synagogue, a school, yeshiva, I will provide that. I want people to feel secure. I want people to know when they drop their kids off at school that they're going to come home at the end of a day. I'll continue to provide those resources with the state legislature, even daycare centers. We increased it from 25 million to 10 million. Grants are now open, everyone. That's why I'm making the pitch. The grants are open right now. State police, as I said, have been involved. We're giving DAs the tools they need. I want to make sure that you can never say we couldn't do something because we didn't have the resources. I'll make sure you have the resources to prosecute hate crimes. And also, in my first day of the state this year, I announced that there'll be a series of crimes added to the list of offenses that can be prosecuted as hate crimes. Everything from rape and gang assault and the graffiti that we just saw last night, and arson. And what that means, if someone is motivated by hate and they commit this assault, it can be prosecuted as a hate crime because it always should have been. This is a different category. The motivation is different. But also, if a group of people do it, it could be a gang assault or hate crime collectively as a group. So we have to have the option that our district attorneys are asking for and helped us come up with this language. We have to make these changes. And we have the prosecutors and the advocates and progressives and moderates and conservatives. It doesn't matter because every group that's targeted wants to know that people cannot do this again. Victims want to make sure that they'll be the last. They don't want anyone else to endure the indignity of being shoved on a subway or pushed down on a street. They want this stopped. And what has happened already is so many of these communities have already changed their behavior, not going out once the sun sets, and the sun sets early these days, not going on the subway, afraid to go to doctor's appointments. Why should New Yorkers have to change their everyday lives because of fear of a hate crime? Let's stop that. Let's commit to stopping that. And that's an important part of my budget. Make sure we have the resources to stop that. And to say that we will no longer tolerate this. We're going to have to be tougher. Yes, there's many ways to touch this. And again, families are important, schools are important, museums are important. But I also want to make sure that our streets are safe, that everyone who walks them knows they're going to get home safely. And I want to thank again the Lieutenant Governor for convening people in 10 regional councils and having them talk about this. Over 120 meetings, community meetings throughout the state, listening sessions. and what we've done with our hate crime and bias reporting. Just in October, we established a hotline. Over 200 incidences just since October. So, my friends, this is the task before us. I've spoken about it before. We did something on hate crimes back in September. We didn't solve it then. We may not solve it today. But we're sure as hell going to try, because doing nothing is not an option. Complacency can never sit in and say, this is just the way it is. This is New York. This is New York State. And that stands for something. That means something to people. And it means that we'll stand together to protect everyone and their rights and allow no hate in our state. That's what today is all about. I thank you for being here to listen, but also for going out into the communities and letting people know that we are going to turn the tide. We will do this. We're committed. We'll have the resources. We have the voices necessary. There is no stopping us, because again, there are far more of us than there are of them. And let them know we're coming after them. Thank you very much. With that, let me introduce our District Attorney, Alvin Bragg.
Thank you so much, Governor, for your phenomenal leadership on this critical issue. Who else is inspired that we live in a state where our lieutenant governor, our governor, talk about leading with love? It is inspiring. I want to thank the sponsors, Senator Brad Hornlund-Siegelman and Assemblymember Grace Lee, for their leadership and for focusing on this. This is something that's been really a labor of love partnering, and the governor and the lieutenant governor have spoken so eloquently. I wanted to talk about how this affects our practice and the tools that we need as district attorneys. We work day in and day out here in the city with the NYPD, sitting across from survivors and victims, and it's sobering and gut-wrenching when you talk to the victim of a hate crime, one that is in every sense a hate crime, but not so under the law. And the governor gave a great example, one that we see. If you are assaulted in New York State by one person, we can charge that, if it's motivated by hate, as an assault as a hate crime. If you're assaulted by 5 people for the same reason, we can't charge that as a hate crime under gang assault because it's not a predicate under the statute. So that's what we're here. 31 offenses to be added to the statute. Common sense, yes. Common sense fixes that we need. I'm inspired by the work of my colleagues, DA Katz and DA Rocha. We need this to help underscore what we heard from our leaders, that we can prosecute and hold people accountable who are doing these unspeakable acts. It will really, really go a long way, and not just for us, but for the survivors and victims who we have to sit across from and who we're working with day in and day out. And the time is really now. I was, like the governor mentioned, she met with advocates and talked from last year. I, too, had an opportunity to do that. It really is unifying to be in a room with so many different communities that have been targeted with hate. But binding together, we came up with this statute, and the time really is now. We are working day in and day out, not just here in Manhattan, but throughout the state, our colleagues as DAs. So we need this tool. I thank the governor, I thank the lieutenant governor, I thank the sponsors, and just can't wait until it's signed into law, and then we can do the work. And I look at DA Katz and DA Rocha. We can do the work that we need to do in our offices to help continue to keep us safe. So thank you so much. Now we'll bring up my fellow Manhattanite, Assemblymember Grace Lee, who, before she came into office, the very first time we sat down together, she said, hate crimes are on the top of my list. Assemblymember Grace Lee.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the governor for convening us here today to advocate for this important initiative. She has been an incredible ally to minority communities and has fought so hard to get resources for us in the budget and now to support us in legislation to better protect and support our communities. I want to thank my sponsor of the bill, my sponsor on the Senate side, Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel, and of course, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg for working with me on this legislation. I represent Manhattan's Chinatown, and our community has been incredibly hard hit over the last several years. It's not an exaggeration to say that almost every single person in the community has been themselves victimized or knows someone who has been victimized, including my own family. My daughter and I were walking down the street a few years ago in broad daylight and were attacked by a woman who threw a bottle at us and shouted racist slurs. So this is something very personal to the Asian community, but is also personal to so many people in this room who represent the Jewish, Muslim, Black, and LGBT communities who have been greatly impacted. As hate has increased in New York, the types of crimes committed and our understanding of hate crimes have evolved in a way that our current laws have not accounted for. Under our existing laws, people are not always being held accountable for the intention of their crimes, and this law is going to change that. When they are not held accountable, this is incredibly damaging to our communities. When we don't address or acknowledge hate, there is a long-term corrosive impact on our communities. We will continue to see hate crimes repeated again and again. It is also important that we recognize and validate the experience of hate crimes victims. By acknowledging when hate crimes are committed, we give vulnerable communities an opportunity to make their voices heard. I look forward to working with the governor and my colleagues to pass the Hate Crimes Modernization Act, as well as getting additional resources in the budget to ensure all of our communities are safe. And this year, we will pass a budget and send a message to all New Yorkers that hate is not welcome in our state. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Imam Mansour Rafiq Umar for his remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hate crimes in the city and across the state of New York are a rising problem for the Muslim community, and they have increased more than 400%, which is completely unacceptable. First, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm here as a representative of the Muslim community, and this effort is what we need in order to change the narrative across the state. The Muslim community is asking our legislature, we're asking our representatives to pass this bill and to help protect all of us. We care about the Muslim community, we care about the Christian community, we care about the Jewish community, we care about all communities. And it is important for us to make that very clear that this is about all of us. It's not just about one group or one issue, it's about all of our issues. And Islamophobia is a problem, and if it is a problem for us, it is a problem for you. And lastly, to my fellow community leaders and members, I beg you to take advantage of the funding that is available. Governor Hochul has made this funding available to us. We should absolutely take advantage of it. It will protect our houses of worship. We will have security. These are easy steps for us to protect ourselves and to ensure that even if we cannot vanquish hate in totality, that at least we can protect ourselves against the crimes of that. We must do our best as well not to legitimize those who hate by way of our statements and lack thereof. This is a primary cause and a source of hurt and pain, and we can make a huge difference by speaking truth to power and by being honest with ourselves. I thank you so much for the invitation, and I would like to introduce Rabbi Steinmetz. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam Umar, and it was really a pleasure getting to meet you and getting to know you. Good morning, everyone. I come to speak to you on behalf of a community that is under attack. I can speak to you as that members of our synagogue, some have been assaulted, more have experienced slurs, and even more have been intimidated directly. And all of this is exploded since October 7th, which according to statistics that have been researched by the ADL, there has been a 337% rise in anti-Semitism. And we're here this morning to express what is an important truth, and that is that there is no small hate crime. Every hate crime is a large crime. We know that vandalism can escalate rapidly into violence. This past summer in August, our synagogue was among 4 different targets on the Upper East Side that had anti-Semitic graffiti. Now, one could dismiss graffiti as being insignificant, but our community knows better. We know from our history that small acts of vandalism can quickly escalate. We have seen this recently, where people who will be tearing down posters will turn around and assault others. There have been bomb threats. There have been swatting attempts. Our community understands that if we leave the door open just a little bit, vandalism quickly escalates to violence. And that's why we are here today. And so I turn to the governor, I turn to all those who are assembled to thank them, because this law means a lot, not just because it will close loopholes, because it means that you're standing behind all of our communities. It means that all New Yorkers understand that they should stand behind our communities. And this law, which is so important, also carries with it powerful symbolic value. And we thank you all for standing behind our communities. I would like to introduce Melissa Sklarz.
Wow, being introduced by the rabbi. My mom would have loved that. So thank you, Governor. Thank you for having this event today. Today, as we all know, is the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Transgender Civil Rights Bill here in New York, Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act. So thank you, Governor Cuomo. Thank you, Governor Hochul, who has always been with us. Sean Coleman and Ace and all trans New Yorkers are very grateful for the support that we've received here. Equality New York is the largest organization advocating for LGBTQ people and their families in New York. We are statewide, training, advocacy, and organizing. Last year, we had the Trans Safe Haven Act in New York. America has gotten the message. Trans people are coming to New York in record numbers because New York is a safe haven. And they're going wherever they can find affordable housing in an effort to start new lives. What we've seen is west of the Hudson is you have an entire political community deciding, starting that with trans children is a danger to all children and the slippery slope of trying to eliminate trans identity. New York and Equality New York will fight against this. We saw in 2016 where the culture changed the political climate, or maybe the political climate changed the culture. We now see hate as a political strategy. Behavior that was unacceptable in the past, we see all the time, whether we're black and brown or Asian or Jewish or Muslim or LGBT or especially trans people. People that look different are now open game. And this is a strategy. We now see protests against Drag Queen Story Hour. So visualize a bunch of parents bringing their kids to a library and angry protesters and police protecting these little children. Visualizing laws being passed. Here in New York, we now have an anti-trans sports bill that's been introduced in Albany. I have full belief that our progressive allies and our pro-equality allies will prevent this from happening. We've heard about, all of us have an idea of what hate crimes is. You know, in the trans community, in the LGBTQ community, it is actual physical violence. Violence against trans people is endemic nationwide. Here in New York, we are doing our best. We are all doing our best. The solution against hate crimes is for us coming together, as we're doing today under the leadership of Governor Hochul, to make sure that we can all be stand united. And visibility. Visibility is our greatest weapon. You know, education, training, and all that. But visibility, standing up when it's difficult, is the most important thing we can do. As we know, courage is not to be afraid. It's to be afraid and to do it anyway. Thank you.
That concludes our program.